All right, so we should be good to go. Thank you, Haley, for the intro. And yes, I am the Ag Program Manager there. Yeah, if anybody has any questions as we go through here, feel free to throw them in the chat box, or we'll save some time at the end for Q&A. But tonight, we are going to talk about some farmland access and leasing for landowners. So I really broke this up into kind of like two parts, or I'll speak about it in two parts here. But mainly, it's either you're a landowner looking for a farmer to kind of lease or rent your property, or you are a landowner who is looking to go into farming. So there's just a bunch of different things and resources that I thought y'all should know about, and I will jump right into it. So like I said, Haley's going to monitor the chat here, so just let me know as we go. So first up, in figuring out what is attractive, either for farmers who are looking to lease land or rent land, or you yourself as a landowner, what you're kind of looking for when evaluating your different farmland or the land that you have. A couple of good resources that we have are the Sullivan County Real Property website. I don't know if any of you have gone on there and checked it all out yet, but there's a ton of good information on there. You can find, ownership records, any tax parcel numbers, land taxes, kind of gives you a good idea if you're, searching for farmland, what that could incur on you. We also have something called the Web Soil Survey, and I'll show you a slide on that a little bit later. But that is a great method. It's kind of almost looks like Google Maps, but with soil information on what your land has. And a lot of times, if you're looking at a large parcel or, 30 acres, 20 acres, whatever, you can't like visually see the whole thing, or you can't access it all to just check and see, where there are different slopes or where there's different water sources, things like that. So the Web Soil Survey is a great tool that I'll show you. Different things to consider would be your soil considerations. I urge everybody, if they're going to be either leasing their land for farmers or going to be farming it itself, to do some soil testing. I have information on that. But it's a great way to see what your soil is going to need to get it up to speed in terms of soil amendments like fertilizer or lime. Infrastructure considerations in terms of figuring out if the property that you have is attractive to farmers, or what type of farmers would want to farm on that property. You have very different needs for many different ag industries. So like, a vegetable farmer versus, say, a pig farmer might have very different needs when it comes to infrastructure. And of course, your climate, slope, zones, different things like that. So here is a screenshot of the real property tax services on the county website. You can see that up there. I believe I have a link on the next one that we'll be sending out to everybody. But you can go on there and type in the property address, the township, and go ahead and look at all different things associated with that property. How much school taxes are, land taxes, ownership records, things like that to try and access. So it's a great tool. And there's a link for you. Again, we're going to send this presentation out to you. Here is the other thing that I mentioned. This is the Web Soil Survey, and this is through the USDA, we call it the USDA NRCS, but it's the Natural Resources Conservation Service. If you know anything about agriculture, we have plenty of alphabet soup when it comes to different names. So if you hear the NRCS, this is, one of the websites that they host. And this is where we can go ahead and when you get into this website and you push on the green button, it'll bring you into this. And this is what it'll look like, excuse me, when you go ahead and access the information. So basically on the left-hand side, you'd see an area to put the address of the farm property or your property, and you go ahead and type that in, and I can guide anybody on how to go about getting to this point. It's not too many steps, but for purposes tonight, I just pulled up a property and showed the aerial view of all the different um, soil types that are in here. I'm not sure if you can see my mouse or not, but each of these little um, shapes, I guess, all these different ones here, this one, these are all different. So on the left-hand side of the map unit here, it'll give you the acreage and percentages of the different soil types. So if you're a farmer who is looking for property, this is a lot of great information to know about a single property. And it also gives you the sloping. And if you click on those, there's tons more information. So it's an overabundance of information to give farmers or yourself a great idea of what your land has in terms of soil. And again, I'd be happy to walk anybody through how to do this at some point. Another resource here we have, of course, is our website that we do a really good job here at trying to keep up to date. So you can go to sullivancce.org and the agriculture tab at the top here. We have so many different links as well as different guidebooks that we have on resources on how to farm in general in New York State. And then we also have some more uh, like industry specific ones like poultry farming or vegetable farming, you name it, really. There's a lot of great guidebooks in there. Okay, so beyond the first initial resources that we have, I wanted to explain a little bit of land considerations that either is going to be attractive for farmers and why they're looking for it, or you yourself as a landowner. So this is kind of different soil considerations, and basically, if you're farming, you're mostly rooted in the soil, no matter what industry it's going to be, even livestock. Livestock has pasture, pasture grows in the soil. So it's a lot about soil. I'll talk a lot about it. But depending on the region you are and depending on the property, all properties are different. Some are better suited to grow certain crops than others. Some are better for livestock rather than vegetables, or you name it. It can go either way. But certain things that farmers do look for in soil, and I did add this handy diagram here or image, just to give an idea of the different um, soil types that are in soil. So we have, you have your clay, you have your sandy, kind of down near the riverbanks, down by the Delaware River, you'll see more sandy loam, sandy clay, which is much different soil than what we have, say, at the top of in Jeffersonville or even down in Mamakating. It's just all different. So it all depends where you are, what you could grow. But things that farmers do look for is your texture. pH is super important. And I think the next slide, I'll talk about pH a little more, how fertile that land is. And of course, if anybody's tried to walk outside in the woods or your pasture, or even to the mailbox, we all know drainage is super important these days because we've obviously had an already wet spring, and I doubt it will stop at the moment. So knowing how drainage affects on property will definitely be something that would be good information to have as a landowner or a farmer. All right, so again, farming here is big on soil. So other soil considerations is pH. And that is super important to farmers who are growing not only vegetables, but field crops, pasture, you name it. But um, the diagram here on the right shows the kind of sweet spot for pH for growing um, anything really. But I'll just say vegetables for this um, example. So really your sweet spot is somewhere around 6.2 to 6.8. Really it's like 6.2 to 6.5 is like the real sweet spot. And that is the area where if your pH is in that area, the nutrients in the soil have the ability to be uh, uptaken, uptaken. I always mess that word up, Haley, but to be absorbed by the plant itself. So if your pH is too low or too high, your plants are not going to be able to absorb the correct amount of nutrients just because your pH is off. So really pH is pretty critical for healthy plants, and that's why, we apply lime um, or not, or we let the rain come through. Um, so we want to make sure that that pH is pretty on point. But there are some plants that obviously have different pH values that they like. For example, blueberries. If you have a lot of blueberries outside or in your property, you probably have some acidic soil, and because blueberries do like around 4.4 to 5.5 pH. So, that's very different than what your tomatoes will like or your apples will like, and those would grow pretty poorly in acidic soil, but blueberries often thrive. So, that's really the main difference and the purpose of this slide here that I wanted to show you. And the one way to find that out is to do some soil testing. And that is very easy. You can go ahead and call our office and we'll be able to walk you through how to do the soil sample and how to get it to the lab if you want to do it by yourself, or you can drop it off at our office and we'll fill out the forms and send it up to the lab. But right now, I think the soil test is around $13.50 to $18 or $18.50 per sample. It might have gone up a little bit since the slide was made, but it's somewhere around that per soil sample. And the good thing is that it will give you recommendations on what to do to your soil for the next 3 years in terms of amendments. So it'll give you how much lime and how much fertilizer to apply for the next 3 years to get it up to speed to grow what you want to grow. So in the last example, if we were growing blueberries, we'd have very different soil amendment recommendations than if we were growing tomatoes, mostly because of pH. So just as an idea on that. But yeah, you can call the office and we'd be happy to walk you through that. So, like I mentioned before, infrastructure considerations. So if you're looking for a farmer to lease your land or farm on your land, or you yourself are trying to farm, you're going to need to figure out what kind of infrastructure do you need. Things like where are you gonna have your equipment, like tractor if you need that. Where are you gonna put your animals if that's what you need? Do you need fencing? Water. Water is super important. And all these things are probably gonna always have a dollar amount attached to them. So figuring out, if that is something that is going to be on your dime as a landowner or on the farmer's dime as a someone who's renting or leasing the land. But there's always going to be some sort of infrastructure that is going to be needed, no matter what industry of agriculture you're going to be doing. Again, buildings, vegetable farms oftentimes have a lot of equipment, even with like your high tunnel or your greenhouse. Is there going to need to be power on that property? Does it have access to power? If it does, is it adequate enough for what the farmer is proposing to do on that property or you want to do on that property? And then fencing, pasture, and water. Always water, because let me tell you from experience, it's great to have water where you need it and not have to be lugging it around the property in buckets, especially if you have crops or livestock. I mean, there's just so much water needs that it's really good to have access to water. Here is a map, and this was just updated this past year here, and it's our plant hardiness zone map. And what this shows is that prior to this past update of the map, we had 3 zones in our county. But as you can see, our county's right here. We only have 2 now. So we've increased in zone temperature, I would say. So right now we are, let's see, say 6A and 5B at the northern part of the county. So, things are getting warmer, so that does help a little bit with growing certain crops that otherwise might have had trouble in the past. I would say, a lot of your fruit trees, like peaches, apples, um, tend to have a little bit more trouble dealing with late frosts. So it's nice to see that we're getting a little bit warmer, I guess one could say. So just something to keep in mind if you are growing certain varieties of fruits or vegetables, just to know that our zone is important. Okay, so now we're going to move on into the leasing of the land. And this is a great option for landowners to do. Not just to farmers, but whomever really. But farmers are always looking for land to access because, well, land access in general is one of the biggest challenges with beginning farmers or new farmers. Because land prices are so high, they often need to rent or lease property as a means of getting access to land. So it's a great way to have that kind of relationship. And there's a couple of options. I'm going to go into, like a lease contract and show you what that is and give you some ideas of, potential pricing options. But, you know, we have, different ways to determine cash rent. And I'll talk about some more later, but there's your general going land rate or cash rental rate for the land or the area that we have. You can figure out a way to do, if there's like a high valued crop that they're growing, you could do a certain percentage of profit. You could do which is most popular here in Sullivan County and a lot of New York State, which is what the landowner needs to cover, taxes or any fixed costs, and something called um, agriculture assessment, which I will talk about later, which is having a farmer leasing your land. You're able to take advantage of agriculture assessment where you would have a reduction in your property taxes. And a lot of times that's what, the farmer to landowner um, relationship looks like. They'll get you ag assessment and reduce property taxes. And then, that's their rent for you. Other ways, if you are looking for some kind of partnership, you can do a share rent option. Just know that if you are not just leasing land, if you're leasing farm buildings, sometimes there's more insurance that's required. So you might just have to come up with an agreement on a price that covers all those things too. So again, there's a million different ways that you can go ahead about figuring out what it costs to either lease land or rent land. And a lot of things go into it. And, every place is different. So in order to do a lease between a farmer, there's a written lease that is available. There's plenty of templates online. I believe I even have a slide at the end of this here. We're hosting a a workshop with Pace Law School to talk more specifically about leasing. So they're the experts on all things legal, way more than myself. And so that would be a great workshop to attend, and that's on May 1st, I believe. And you guys should attend that one as well. But in general, a written lease is gonna be uh, just have a few different parts here. Your description of what the land is, what the lease includes, if there's buildings, equipment, anything that's not included, the rights of each party, whether you're, a business partner or just a landowner, what the owner of the property and what the lessee can do, different things like that. Who's gonna be paying for what in terms of improvements, so anything that we have like, fencing or soil amendments or, even if you have a lot of fallow land or land that's looking pretty rough, who's gonna pay to get that up to farming speed, into a pasture? Any kind excuse me, any kind of agricultural practices that, you're going to want to follow or have that done on your land. So, like, for example, organic, or if you have certain prohibited practices that you're looking to do. One thing that I did see that I liked and that I wanted to mention was the condition of the land at the end of the lease, and the bottom bullet here of bringing land back into production. Oftentimes, land looks a lot better, once a farmer's been on it, especially if it's fallow land, if you've had nice pasture or vegetable fields or things like that, just note in your lease what condition you'd like the land at, you know, uh, the same as it was or better, usually nobody wants it worse than it started, like if you had a bunch of, pigs or something rooting up big holes in your yard, but, um, that's just something to add, and, last time I talked with farmers who had some, leases, this is something that they would have liked to have in their lease, ahead of time. So, length of the lease is pretty important. If you're going for agriculture assessment or your reduction on property taxes for a farmer, the lease length minimum is 5 years. Um, that's what you have to have in order to get the ag assessment, but otherwise, it can be whatever you want. Um, Normally, if you're growing some kind of vegetable crop or something like that, you're gonna want multiple years, if not a longer lease, because, it takes a while for the soil to get up to speed and your infrastructure, um, up ahead of time, before you start seeing yields. So, things like apple orchards, you don't want like a 2-year lease because your apples haven't even grown yet before they even, you'd be kicked off the property or something like that. So just know that length of leasing is important. Who's going to be paying for insurance? Who's going to be paying for taxes? Any provisions? Things like that. But again, there's a a ton of lease agreements, templates, and then I urge you also, if you are thinking about doing this, to join us on the May 1st for the Pace Law School webinar that we're going to have. Also, the Farm Commons is a great website for legal services with workshops, and they work well with farmers and have a lot of resources with leasing as well. So check out these two websites. It's pretty good. Okay, so the big question, and this is not even a drum roll situation, land rental rates. So this is determined by, um, our ag census that they just put out. In true Sullivan County fashion, we didn't have a lot of data on it, but I can tell you that um, they did have data for Delaware County and Orange County. Now, there's a huge wide range of categories that land can be kind of put into. This is the price for non-irrigated cropland, meaning no water, not irrigated, no access to water. Irrigated cropland would be a little bit higher. You have pasture land, you have forest land, those are lower. So it's all like on this little bit of a scale, but it's not an astronomical amount. So for example, between Delaware and Orange County, well, we'll just call it $35 an acre is something that you'd see for non-irrigated cropland, generally in Sullivan County. And that is per acre per year. So that's what you're looking for. Now, a lot of things can make this higher or lower, if you have infrastructure on the property, if it's already amended, if it's already ready to grow on, if you have some primo soil, these are things that can increase or lower the amount that you could charge for rent or pay for rent on property. Okay. So obviously, New Jersey here, Long Island generally is a lot more. We have the Midwest. That's where it's prime acreage over there. So moving on so we talked about like soil and what farmers are looking for, but there's a lot of things that in terms of regulations and zoning and farming that I wanted to make you all aware of before you either go ahead and start farming or invite farmers to come farm on your land where there hasn't been a farm before. So number one rule is to check with your local municipality to figure out if you can farm there in the first place or farm um, the way that you want, like in terms of the amount of livestock that you want, or usually vegetable has a lot less restrictions, but you'll see restrictions on the number of animals that you can have as in livestock. So check with your local municipality. Oftentimes acreage, you have to have a certain amount of acreage in order to farm in that town. There's different things like road setbacks, lot size, site plan requirements that can often, people don't realize about until they've invested a lot of money into whatever they're trying to farm and then realize it's not allowed to where they are. So check that out ahead of time. And if you have any trouble, you can always call the office and we can look it up for you too. All right, so I'm just going to take one moment here before I get into ag districts. Was there any questions on the stuff that we had up till then?
I think we're looking good so far. Yeah.
All right, so moving into the next part. So we have, there's two things I'm going to talk about in this section. We have agriculture districts and agricultural assessment. So ag districts, ag assessment. Agriculture districts has to do with the land. Ag assessment is about your reduction in property taxes. You don't have to be in both of these at the same time. You can have just ag assessment. You can just be in an ag district. You don't have to do both. You can. That's great. Normally, a lot of people do, but let me get into it. So for agriculture districts, this is a way of New York State to help encourage the continued use of farmland production and letting farmers have some sort of protections against any kind of overly restrictive local laws. We all know that farming can be a little smelly, can be a little noisy. So if you're in an ag district, there's some protections against, nuisance, lawsuits, things like that. You can be backed by New York State ag and markets in those areas. So being in an ag district, if you are farming, is a great idea to have that sort of protections. But you can only receive those protections if you are actively, if you're farming. So there are plenty of properties in this county that are in an ag district, but they're not farming on that property. So, they won't get those protections by ag and markets. So a lot of times you'll see ag districts come into play with like overly restrictive um, local uh, town codes or zoning codes, um, like setbacks. You might see residential setbacks being 50 feet, but then the same township might say, oh, but a farm has to be 100 feet. They just want to make sure that everything is fair and equal. So there shouldn't be two different setbacks in that example. So that would be like an overly restrictive example of how ag and markets could come into play and assist a farm out, being like, no, well, you should be at 50, just like residential should be. But that's just an example. And again, it only counts if you are a farmer. And I'll tell you how to go ahead and get into an ag district in a minute here. But often also, farms that are located in an ag district are generally, I'll say generally, it's not always, but generally exempt from some local and state regulations, including the SECRA, the State Environmental Quality Review, some building codes. You don't get carte blanche to just go ahead and throw up a building wherever you want just because you're on a farm or in an ag district. There's some permitting and building codes that you do have to abide by, and generally some exemptions to some professionally stamped plans, meaning, you don't have to, depending on the building, depending on the site. Again, this is by case, but sometimes you don't have to go excessively into debt in order to get some of these professionally stamped plans for agriculture buildings if you're in an ag district. But as a reminder, if you are inviting the public onto your property, there is public health and safety that has to be considered, and therefore, building codes and fire code would come into play, if you're having like a U-pick or animal petting zoo, or what farm tours, anything like that you're inviting the public onto your property, you're going to have to follow, for public health and safety. And again, I'll reiterate that you must be a farm operation and follow sound agriculture practices in order to get the protections of an ag district. And there's a whole review on how to do that, and we'd be happy to walk you through how that all goes down. But these are just, we pulled from ag and markets. I'm not going to go through them, but the different building codes and how they are defined through ag and markets here. Basically ones that are constructed and designed for agriculture purposes. And they do have some exemptions on building code when it comes to agriculture buildings. Okay, so this is all, I'll give you the website where you can find this information, so you'll have all that there, and fire code too. But again, if you're inviting the public into it, these things you'd have to follow these. All right, so if you go into the New York State Ag and Markets, there's a whole lot of information that is super helpful, and a lot of guidance documents that all show you what they are, on how to get into the ag district and how to navigate some of the local laws that you might see and how they kind of will blend with ag and markets law. Now, these are the good guidance documents. So if you're looking at your local laws or local town codes, and you're having some issues with what you want to do, here are some great guidance documents that assist not only the public like us, but also local governments on different agriculture markets, kind of guidance documents and standards that farms should or could abide by here. So, farmers markets, composting, farm worker housing, nutrient management practices, greenhouses. This is a big one that I get a lot. And I'll speak about a little bit later, but the difference between a greenhouse and a high tunnel or a hoop house. Greenhouses generally have like a solid floor made of concrete, and high tunnels or hoop houses you plant right in the ground. So greenhouses are, like a taxable building. High tunnels are not. So there's some guidance documents in there that high tunnels are equipment and greenhouses generally aren't, but there's some great information in there. With the definition of a farm startup, that is something that you should look at if you're starting to farm, as far as how it goes with ag districts. In Sullivan County, we have two ag districts. We have ag district number 1 and ag district number 4. And right now we are in the open window that is open once a year to be included, or to get an application to be included into the ag district. So if your property is not in an ag district right now and you would like it to be, if you're already farming or beginning farming, now is a great time to call into our office and request an application. So each year between April 1st and April 30th is the open window that we have to get into the ag district. So you go ahead, contact our office, come out and do a site visit. Then that gets recommended to the Farmland Protection Board and then through the legislature and to be included into an ag district. So again, Melinda Medoff from our office, she runs the ag districts and the applications, so she'd be able to go ahead and answer all your questions about that and whether now is a good time to apply or maybe wait till you're further into the farming, business. If anybody has been driving through some of these around the county here, we have a bunch of right to farm law signs posted through different communities. I believe there's like maybe 9 or so. And if you see these, or your county or your town, I mean, has adopted a right to farm law, it just means that they're more I will say four, that there are certain right to farm laws to help protect and promote the farmer's right to farm. So they're pro agriculture generally in that town, and if there's any issues between neighbors and farmers, there's usually kind of a mediation program that's available too. So it's great to farm or have property located in a town that has a right to farm law. Okay, so that's ag districts. Now we're moving on into ag assessment. So this is all about the reduction in property taxes. So this is what people really find beneficial for having farmers lease their land or to start farming themselves. So it's really broken up into 2 parts, maybe 3, but I'll say 2 for now. But ag assessment, again, your reduction in property taxes, there's certain farming enterprises that qualify. There's a little bit longer of a list here than what's listed of what qualifies. I think they just updated a couple more things, but generally pretty much any farming activity really that I've seen in Sullivan County would be a part of ag assessment, or you could include ag assessment. So, things like field crops, fruits, vegetables, anything horticulture related, anything livestock related, maple, honey. They've included or, increase to like propolis, Christmas trees, any kind of aquaculture, um, a commercial horse boarding operation with 10 or more horses boarded at a time is another way that you can qualify for ag assessment. And just keep in mind that, however much property you own, if there's a residential property on that piece of land, they're gonna take that out of the reduction. Okay, so there'll be a certain kind of circle or area that's going to be just the same. That's going to be surrounding your residential property. All right, so here's the two part. There's two ways that you can qualify for agriculture assessment as a landowner, if you're farming here. So if you have, it's over 7 acres or under 7 acres. If you have over 7 acres of land and you earn over $10,000 in gross income from farming on one of those avenues that I mentioned before, livestock, vegetable, all those other things. So if you have over 7 acres and you generate more than $10,000 in gross income from your farming enterprise, generally shown on your Schedule F for your taxes, then you can qualify for ag assessment. On the other side, if you have less than 7 acres, you need to qualify with $50,000 or more in gross income. Okay, don't shoot the messenger. That's how New York State defines their ag assessment. It's either under 7 or over 7 acres. And the income requirements are over 7 acres is 10,000, under 7 acres is 50,000. Okay. Now, there is a caveat that if you yourself are not farming, if at least 7 acres of ag land owned by a rural landowner is rented to a farmer or leased, and that farmer meets the income requirement of the 10,000 or 50,000 on their own farmland, and you have that 5-year written lease, you yourself can get a reduction in your property taxes, or your property can qualify for ag assessment, even though they might not gain that whole $10,000 on your property. So as long as the farmer is leasing additional land and has their own land as well, or qualifies for ag assessment on their own property, then they can rent out yours, and you can also get agriculture assessment. So that is one of the benefits of leasing to a farmer, that they can qualify for land on agriculture assessment on your land. You see that a lot with farmers who need extra land for like hay, or to put out some livestock to pasture. That's a good benefit with that. Okay, so the process for ag assessment is a little different than ag districts, because again, they're two different things. This process is just going to the Soil and Water Conservation District, which is in our office in Liberty, and tell them that you want to apply for ag assessment. They're going to go ahead and complete a soil groups worksheet. And that is different than the web soil survey that I explained earlier. The soil groups worksheet is basically, New York State has defined soils already in a book. And it's basically A through double Z or something like that. And, for example, like your muck or your wetland soils are going to be a lot less money, or worth a lot less money in terms of agriculture than, say, like your prime soils. So if you have a lot of prime soils on your property, as defined by New York State, your reduction would be a lot greater in property taxes than if you had all wetlands, right? Because those aren't good for agriculture. Unless you're, I don't know, growing crocodiles or something, but we're not seeing that a lot here. So again, just go to the office, they'll fill that out for you. Again, they cover out around 2 acres for residential area, and you're going to bring this the application with you. That's called RP 305, and if you type that in Google, it will pop right up. And the deadline for this every year is March 1st. So it comes up every year. So you can do it anytime during the year, but it won't go into effect until, March 1st. So ag assessment isn't automatic. You have to, like if you buy new land or something like that, you have to reapply or add a new parcel to your ag assessment. And you also have to reapply each year, just kind of stating like, there's no new additions of land, no changes on the land, and you hand that in. So, but this is what Soil and Water can help you with, or you can call our office and I'd be happy to walk you through it. I know a couple of these um, um, options here between like ag districts, ag assessment. It's always confusing, and people mix them up all the time. So we talk about a lot, so no problem. All right, just finishing up here. Check my time, doing okay. A couple of other things that we have for landowners as an option. If you have a lot of forest land, that has to be at least 50 continuous acres. There's something called the Forestry 488 program. And that is also a reduction in your property taxes. I think I read up to almost I think I read earlier it was 100. Oh, yeah, it lowers your taxes by up to 80% of the assessed value of your property. So that is a nice option if you just have a lot of forest land and you're able to get into the 480A program. You can, not pay as much taxes on that. Okay, finishing up here on property tax exclusions. So this is something that I'd like you to know as a landowner. And these are for generally if you are farming on that property. So farmers have a couple of tax credits that they can take advantage of. One is the farmer's school tax credit, and that allows any farmer who 2/3 of your eligible gross income must be profit from farming over the past 3 years can get a tax credit on their state income tax up to 100% of the school taxes paid on the first 350 acres. So again, to be eligible for this school tax credit, the largest, how do I put this? The person who owns the most in your family, that income has to be from farming. Okay, so 2/3 of that, your income has to be from farming. Okay. But that's a nice option to not pay school tax because I don't know if you, I mean, my school taxes are quite a lot. So I wish I had this. Other ones here, if you produce or build any structures or buildings that are considered ag buildings, they are exempt from an increase in property taxes for 10 years. That's a nice one. They have I put this in here, but let me tell you, there is a couple of there used to be more historic barn exemptions or grants, things like that, but they keep getting put into play and then taken away. So if you're interested in the historic barns, um, either the grant or the exemption, let's double check before you go ahead and bring that to your tax accountant. But they might also know better. But I've seen it where they have had these and then funding ran out and they've got rid of them. But I will say this, if it is around, we have historic barns, and the exemption is from 100% of the increase in the assessed value. attributable to reconstruction or rehab of a historic barn is granted for 1 year. So if you are rehabbing an old barn constructed before 1936, then this is the tax exemption for you. The other one here is your temporary greenhouses. And again, this was the difference between a greenhouse and a high tunnel. So, basically a floor with a greenhouse, like a cement floor versus no cement floor with a high tunnel. So that's something that is temporary, what they consider a temporary greenhouse, and there's Ag and Markets guidance documents for this. And you don't have to pay taxes or any kind of increases in your assessment for temporary greenhouses. Okay. There's also one for anything with replanted or expanded orchards. For those that have that, you can receive a partial tax exemption. And that only applies to your new or replanted or expanded orchard or vineyard. Okay. All right. So I think that is all my part on there.
Great. So I will take over here and share my screen. So I just wanted to go over the Farmland for a New Generation website because it's a really great way to make yourself visible to farmers and really start putting your land out there. Hold on one second here. Let me share. Can you see that? Everybody can see that?
Yes. Yep. And don't forget at the end, we'll open up for questions after our other presenter goes.
Great. So basically, as a landowner, you can come in and create your profile. And so we're going to just kind of go over all the steps and everything that is not necessarily required, but would make a really comprehensive site. And that's going to help get you some more traction. So, some general information, your farm name or your property name, any kind of label you have, if you don't necessarily have a farm operation name yet, your location, your city, your state, some of the more obvious things here. And so then we get to images. So images are going to be posted at the very top of your profile. And that really makes your profile immediately more eye-catching, and it really does help get more traction. I really encourage you to have pictures of your land and all that you have to offer. That's going to hook people as soon as they click on your profile. So from here, you'll want to list your total acreage that you have available and how much of that is wooded, how much is tillable. And then in the description of the property's current condition and current uses, something that you might want to include here is if the land has ever been in agricultural use before, if it's been fallow or maybe never used, anything like a steep incline that you might want to note, or a place where there's often flooding. This would be a great place to list those details. So down here, we're getting into soil types. So that's another pretty big one for any farmer looking for land. They're going to want to know exactly what they're working with and what they would be starting with if they did choose your land. So that's really important information to get and to have listed. And additionally, so if you did get a soil test done and you had that all compiled in a file, you can go ahead and add that at the bottom of this profile application in the related file section, and that would come up under your soil type as well. So your farm history, if it has ever been used in agriculture before, or any history you have of the property is always really helpful to know as well. And then in the tenure options, you'll want to list basically as many as you're open to. If you are going to choose for lease or for sale, that will cue, listing the price per acre or listing the market value price and the listing website. So depending on what you're looking to do with your land, you'll want to have all that information ready to go. And then with the description of the tenure options, this is where you would list, what exactly you're looking for in a farmer relationship, what term lease you would be open to, whether that be short term or long term, and everything that you might be negotiable to within that 10-year agreement. And this would be a really great place to include farmer housing if you have that to offer as well. Sometimes that can change the terms of the lease. So down here, asking if you're willing to mentor a newer beginner farmer. This one really just, if you have farming experience directly, maybe some business experience that you feel like might be valuable for someone, you can certainly list that, and that can be something that you work out, individually with your farmer. And so, do you require a farmer who qualifies for agricultural assessment? I know Michelle just talked a lot about that. So really with this part, if you're hoping to have the ag assessment on your land to lower those taxes, you would say yes. And basically that can help filter out, a land match for you or a farmer match for you that will help with qualifying your land. You'll also want to be sure that you have enough land to offer for that qualification. Michelle, does that sound right to you? I know you have a lot of information.
Yep. Yep, that's correct. Yep. So it's just an offer, and then either, you're hoping to gain that from them if they have property of their own, or if you want them to work towards getting an ag assessment on your property.
Yep. So moving along. So you'll put your production preferences here. So this is a great place to list if you have preferences as to the agricultural practices, maybe organic versus conventional. If you have a preference for certain crops, maybe that you think or know might do well on the land, or if you're open to having livestock or not. So that would be a good place to list that. The types of crops that could be permitted to produce on the property. This just helps you get a little bit more specific for all that you'd be willing to have. Some of these are, more permanent, especially things like fruits, like blueberries, apples, I don't know, other more long-term type of crops. And again, with the livestock, if you're open to having that on your property, and again, into the farming methods that you're open to. So getting into infrastructure, this is really important to list. A lot of farmers, especially those who have been operating for a while, really know what they're looking for. And these are pretty important in terms of upfront investment and certain costs. So this is also really important, not only to list, but to even have pictures of if you can. And so the preferences and restrictions on the agricultural activities, you would want to list any constraints that you might have due to some certain zoning codes or any other concerns that you have, if you're not necessarily in an ag district, if you might be concerned about how the neighbors are going to respond to any kind of ag production, anything like that would be able to list here. Then, of course, you'll want to list if you're under a conservation easement, if you're aware of any current land zoning restrictions already on your property, if you know that you're located in an ag district or not, and of course, if you'd be willing to have the public on the property as part of the farm business. So that would go along with, ag tourism, and if you'd be open to hosting and having a business like that on the property. So once you've gone through all of these steps, you can save this as a draft as you work through it, and that kind of allows you to come back to it if you don't have time to answer all of these things at once. But once you're done, you would go here to save as and go into ready for review. And basically that sends it off for review and a full approval to make it live on the site. So from here, I wanted to give an example of a pretty comprehensive, nicely eye-catching profile. So you can see that everything looks really good. They have the tillable acres listed, the wooded acres listed. The pictures are nice and bright. They show the infrastructure, and they show that there's, access to the land, which again, it's that first view of the profile. So, makes you want to look a little bit further. So something that's nice and comprehensive, they have their soil types listed here. They talk about the farm history, what the most recent agricultural practice was for the land, and all about their tenure options, and the ag assessments and all of their preferences. So this is kind of what it looks like once you really have all those questions answered and it's put on live on the website. And so on the other side of that, once you're live on the website, you can also search for farmers. And so when you go onto the website here, there's find a farm, find a farmer, and find support. So you would go into find a farmer, which would bring you to this page. So you have some filter options here at the top. So if you had only a couple of acres to offer, you could come in here and try to match with someone who really wasn't looking for all that much land. You could come here, like if you know that you absolutely didn't want livestock on the property, then you could go ahead and filter that out, and so on. So that kind of takes care of some immediate things that you do or don't want on your property, and it brings you to a list. So you can start kind of profile hunting here and actually looking for a farmer that might be a good match for you. And on the reverse side of that, farmers looking for land can do the exact same thing. So this just kind of reiterates the importance of having those big questions answered. So because they're able to filter just like you are. And so if a farmer that's already in practice absolutely knows they need farmer housing on site, they're going to be able to filter that out and start getting more specific with their search as well. So you can also see that there's an interactive map here, and you can kind of click into, certain areas, and it kind of breaks it down for everything that might be listed around. And lastly, if you find yourself really needing help, I know there's a lot of questions that need to be answered to create a comprehensive profile. If you have land in a certain area and maybe you live out of state or something like that, you can contact the person that's closest to wherever your land may be. And just like us right here in Liberty, so we're listed as the regional navigator. So here's my contact information. If you knew that you were in Sullivan County looking to get your profile up and going and start networking with farmers, not only could I help you in assisting with creating your profile, but I can also help you with the matchmaking process. Sometimes it just helps to have another set of eyes on all of this, and that's really what I would be here to do, and any regional navigator in your area would be serving the same purpose. So that's a little bit of a rundown on the website, and I will send out the link for this I can actually put it in the chat, and it'll also be in the follow-up email.